Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for joining this webinar today. My name is buld. I'm a technical transformation architect. I work for the value realization team, part of the professional services organization of VMware. And today we will be looking at operationalizing NSX and IT value. It's a topic that we from the value realization team kind of have to sort of push on more and more these days as NSX continually takes off and customers begin to see want to sort of realize the best out of the product itself. My team is sort of designed around helping customer realize value from VMware technology. And today we'll be focusing on how NSX pretty much fits into that. If you have any questions, please type it into the Q&A chat box. So I'll see if I can answer some as I go along. If not, towards the end, we'll see how many we can get through. So usually for my team, and it's an analogy we use a lot, and because we feel it captures the essence of what we do. And pretty much we look at looking at Formula One. We look at how you can understand how technology in itself, it's not enough to get the outcome you might desire. We look at the people, the process, and the technology. Basically, having a great technology is not always enough to achieve the outcome you want. You need the right people with the right skills, working in a focused center of excellence, people who understand their roles within the organizational processes, and they know how to use the right tools on the right technology. And we believe combining this together is what's required to deliver the outcome in the case of Formula One, winning the race. In case of any other technology, if you look at NSX, you need the right people and processes around it in order to deliver that value that you would expect or you've come to expect from VMware. So the session today will be looking at what are these people and processes that we need to build around this technology and the tools around that. And that pretty much will be the session we're working through. So usually, when it comes to a technology like NSX, and when customers begin to sort of fill around it, there's certain questions that are raised, and I expect some of you might have come across this in your either attempt to adopt NSX or your investigation into implementing it. The kind of questions we kind of hear about pretty much falls into one of these categories. I mean, who will be responsible for NSX? I mean, how will it affect the processes we have? In terms of the people, you could already have teams that have been deployed. I mean, you have teams, you have the virtualization teams, you have your network teams, you have your security teams, and you're kind of looking at how will NSX fit into all this. Then, of course, you could have processes in place. And we know with the value NSX brings in, how would it disrupt, how would it affect the existing processes you have? I mean, it's always a case of there are always processes in place. I mean, certain customers might not consider what they have processes, but in terms of getting the job done, as long as you continue to deliver, you have a process. It might not be repeatable, but it might give you the opportunity now to change the way you do things. And then you see exactly how disruptive or how NSX requires you to revisit how you do certain things. And finally, obviously, you look at the tools you have. How do you equip yourself? What knowledge do you need? What skills do you need to adopt in order to get the best out of NSX? So we'll be looking across these three pillars and to see from a high level how we can begin to adapt our organization, our processes, and to gain new skills and knowledge and tools that are required to actually get the value we would want from NSX. So before diving into to those particular questions, one of the areas I usually when I work with customers and trying to help them understand the value NSX brings, is pretty much looking at how IT organization understand the value of networking within their within the business itself. And what I usually try to stress that to IT organizations is that the most important data point is not necessarily what you do within your silo, but it's whether or not the business is getting the service it wants, when it wants it, and when it needs it, and then the infrastructure surrounding the delivery of that service. And from VMware, of course, we championed the old SDDC, and we have now moved networking into that space itself. So it's not just about the network, it's about the business and its customers and helping them understand that it's all linked together. Once the business is successful in delivering its services, the infrastructure around it should be primed and designed such that the business can adapt and deliver what it wants. And it's today with the advancements of network virtualization, SDN. I mean, a lot of businesses are beginning to understand they need to modernize their network. And they're beginning to hear more and more of the software-defined networking. And they understand that innovation can be driven from this. So we, from the IT, adopting NSX, we need to know we need to adapt the way we do things such that we can drive business needs. Everything of value more or less sits and is connected to the network. So we need to be able to rapidly design and develop solutions from a networking space. So as we look at operationalizing NSX, we need to remember it's tied to the delivery infrastructure, which pretty much supports what the business needs. So usually, when discussing with customers on sessions, because we run workshops and trying to get them to this value, where we always start with the why, and it's a principle that helps guide and manage operational or strategic shifts, and it helps implementation understanding. The why is very important, because when customers understand the key use cases they're bringing NSX in for, and how they need it to drive business value, you then understand how you need to design your operating model. Now, for us, going through the why allows you to set operational goals or like management goals, because if you don't set those goals, you cannot reflect NSX contribution to the entire IT organization. And the way you then further develop NSX will be more or less a silo-based sub-optimization, because you are inwardly looking. But once you can link how NSX can help the business and how it can help the SDDC infrastructure adapt and be agile, then how you design, how you operate NSX becomes more visible, because you are linking the actual implementation and operationalizing it to actual business needs. And what that pretty much needs is that you need the right operating model. And that's quite important, because the operating model, which forms the foundation for execution, which will then be the what on the operations, allows you to create the model that drives operational teams in using NSX properly. And we will look at the operating model that's been developed by VMware for NSX in particular, because it's quite important that by the time you look at how you more or less define the teams and your procedures and rules and tools, you're using the bridge which looks at the operational strategy and your day-to-day implementation, which is the what. So these are the key things that we need to look at as you adopt NSX. You need to understand the why. You need to make sure you have the proper operating model, which is how you will then implement the operations, which will drive the value you hope to get from NSX. And we'll be looking at these areas throughout the session, how these particular pillars help drive value in realizing what you want from NSX. Now, from the value realization team, we have what we consider an operating model, and usually with customers, we work with them to try and help them understand where they sit, because wherever you are in your journey in NSX, there is sort of an end goal which allows you to see the true value, but people start from, or customers start from different particular areas. And looking at the three pillars we saw earlier, the people, the processes, and the tooling, where we have measurements and tests, we sort of work with customers to understand where they sit. Obviously, customers start from different areas. There are some customers who are very silo-based in the way their IT infrastructure is developed. We've got a compute team, your networking team, your security team, which are totally separate. And they sort of work with the old model of, ticketing system and just pass tasks across. And we could have processes based on the physical, manual type of implementation value, where they're pretty much very, very error-prone. And because optimization is focused probably within a silo only, the benefit of actually getting value high up to the business is not as effective as it could be. And from a tooling perspective, it's all domain specific. Again, we have a model we use to help customers see where they are, but the idea is not to say, well, you're not doing it right, but see how you can move from where you are further up the chain where you can see the true benefits. Now, each of these pillars are usually mutually reinforcing. So the better you get in one of them, more or less the others are pulled up along. And the benefits are then seen as you sort of head higher up into the maturity model. So it's usually the most important question you hear most of the time. So who should be responsible for NSX? Now, we've worked with, I personally have worked with a lot of customers, sort of allowing them to see the value. And usually when I run workshops with them and you start with this question, it's quite interesting to see their perception of what NSX is. And it's an exercise I would sort of encourage you to look at inwardly yourself. Wherever you sit, if you're an architect, an engineer, on operations, across any of the particular silos you think NSX sort of contributes to, you will definitely identify aspects of what you do and what NSX can deliver. So when it comes to the question, who is responsible, it's quite interesting to move on with that discussion. So before we answer that, usually what we talk about, or what I try and help customers understand during workshops, is to sort of let's just look at the traditional switch model itself and see the functionality. I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with the sort of a model of a routing switch, where you have the routing blade, which we consider like the control plane, which contains the routing table, and it has the information of what's connected and how to get from one point to another point. All that information is stored in there. Then, of course, you've got a forwarding plane also, which more or less forwards the packets, and that's all physical, is embedded in the physical device. You've got the uplinks, so the uprouter. You've got the management console, and all this are kind of familiar to the networking person who's very, very comfortable with working with this. The idea here, you see, the functionality of networks have been more or less basically shown, and the components each part plays, from the uplink model to the management console to the uplink router. Now, these, of course, are physical routers that are indispensable in our data centers, and the functions they perform are very well clear. The control plane and the data plane and how they work is pretty clear. Now, the same goes for security. If we look at how the security is implemented currently in the data center, we see pretty much traffic having to flow through a firewall, which sort of manages the traffic. I mean, we have from an information security perspective, technical controls where we need these firewalls to be in place in order to adhere to policies driven by the information security team. Now, looking at how traditionally this is implemented, I mean, you could have security zones, which are common these days, is a bit more advanced, but we still need to implement rules identifying source and destination, and an interface from the firewall model needs to sit in each security zone. So to that extent, you have rules passing through a firewall device in order to control how traffic is sort of maintained to ensure the necessary controls are in place. Now, certain aspects of networking security have been virtualized for years, like VLAN and VRFs. They've been around such that to divide broadcast domains and security controls. So these are things that have been in place, and a lot of security and network people are comfortable with this. And the approach here still has a level of protection that is not individual to the workload running in the data center, HVMs. But again, the security person fully understands these concepts and sees how he sees his work in terms of security and how controls should be in place in order to implement the controls needed by the organization. So now let's look at how this picture sort of appears when we look at it from an NSX perspective, looking at our platform. So we have the concept of what we had previously under the routing plane or the routing blade. We have every networking concept here in a virtualized form. We have the control plane here where we have VMs that have the ability to act as the uplink. You have the hypervisor that pretty much serves and hosts the access switch now, and it acts as a data plane, and it's pretty much a gigantic access switch, which is has huge amounts of slots. But the concept of routing now lies with the gateways, where you can have the edge gateway connecting uplink and getting the routing tables. So the form factor there being a VM, and we have VM kernel that pretty much has models that host the VM switch. We have individual VM guests that have firewalls now at the VNIC level. Now, this implementation more or less reflects what you've seen previously from a physical networking and security, but NSX has now virtualized that and allows you to more or less recreate the network world within the hypervisor. You have the edge gateway, which is a VM, that can communicate with the uplink to get routing table and forward that to the access switches so that routing can be done within the ESX kernel. And it is extensible. Now, this isn't meant to give a sort of a full rundown of how NSX works, but the idea is you see what previously existed under the physical and security that's pretty much been represented within the hypervisor being virtualized. But what you also see here is that it's all within the ESX. So we have a technology that's been around for a pretty long time. We have most of the virtualization team very comfortable with it. Virtualizing the x86, they virtualize, and computing pretty much knows a lot about things along the lines of CPU scheduling, maybe NUMA, hyper-threading, in terms of memory ballooning, storage I/O, even networking, thread scaling. These are concepts that are pretty comfortable. The virtualization team are pretty comfortable with that. And again, this pretty much is a lot of the stuff NSX also uses, in as much as it uses a lot of the networking technology, security technology, and as you can see, virtualization of the x86, which allows you to give the compute that allows those particular components to deliver the service they require. So we go back to the question we asked. So based on what we've seen, we immediately can see there are networking and security expertise required in NSX. But we also see that it's software defined and virtualized. And then the key question is, does that mean our virtualization team needs to acquire networking and security expertise? Or is it that our networking security team needs to acquire the virtualization expertise? And as you can see, based on the previous slides, these are very legit questions because these are the core capabilities that you've spotted across that requires you to deliver the value you want from NSX. Just before we answer that, you can see without a doubt that the two key particular areas that are looking at here is the compute and the networking side, which pretty much in most organizations are more silo-based. And you see a bit of a bipolar scale here. But what we need to do is sort of move from the left-hand side to a two-dimensional chart here. What we're doing is breaking down the network into its functional parts. As you can see, we've got the control plane and the data plane. Each has particular functions it serves. And what we need to do is locate the specific functions required for a particular use case or a particular what's been identified in our strategy. And we find out who exactly has the right skills to deliver in them. So what we try to do is pick the functions and interconnect them. And this is part of what an exercise you do as moving into NSX. You understand the key skills that's required and the key components, and then try and find out exactly what are the individual needs, and you then match it. And that moves you closer to what you have on the right side, where you get parts of the flexibility that the compute guys have come to know, and try and move the networking guys into a new world where you're looking a bit more flexible in how you do things. So I guess without a doubt, it comes as no surprise that pretty much in all the organizations I've worked with that we've moved into high performing, when it comes to NSX, it's a bit of a team structure. It's a team that you need to deliver the best value from NSX. If you intend to get the most out of it, you need to try and construct a team across functions that is more or less service-oriented. Now, it's I say cross-functional team. It's you want to call it multifunctional, poly-skilled, interdisciplinary. It doesn't matter. But the point is, you need people with the right skills to come together as working on a single platform to deliver the value which the NSX platform delivers. So you need to be able to create a sort of team that are self-sufficient with diverse skill sets that are needed across the three most important components we looked at earlier. You need to pick the right people that would deliver on. And it's quite important because you need people who understand the shared perspective of what the platform can deliver. People who, across this possibly existing silos, that can consolidate suggestions, people who know how to interface and understand the journey itself. They understand that it cannot be a fragmented approach. If they sort of undertake this as in a fragmented way, as in still sticking to their silos, it would go wrong. So you need to change or build a team structure that is measured on shared goals, and the success is across the team and not any particular silo. I think what's more important also is because most organizations, and it's normal, the team structures are sort of separated, but you need teams that are integrated across the plan, build, and run. So the challenge in most organizations are usually they organize across the plan, the build, and the run, where we have architects who make technical decisions and design decisions are separated from a team, from a different engineering team that build and test solutions, and then you have the IT operations who pretty much are designed to run it, are all sitting possibly under different organizations within the full IT structure. What we say, for those customers worked with that are sort of delivering the most, is you need to create a structure which brings this close together. The faster, the quick feedback that's possible through NSX requires a tight integration across from architecture to operations, because it depending on how you choose to implement operations can affect how the architecture is done. And that's a very, very important point. And that's one we always state: you've got to involve operations from the beginning, because that's pretty much a lot of what you were doing most of the time. NSX and in most IT, you design and deploy once, but operations goes on forever. So you need to get and understand how operations would work with it from the onset, from the design, especially with the software-defined nature or software-defined approach in operations itself. If it's not architected from the onset properly, then operations might be stuck in the way they're doing or they would do it. So usually we talk about not just silos from compute, network, and security. You also need to make sure architecture, engineering, and operations are pretty much in the loop as you move forward. And from experience working with customers, those who have been able to implement it this way are the ones who've got the most out of the product itself. And the key points, which is almost, I cannot stress it enough, it's the people part. You need to make sure the mindset is there. A new culture is being built in how they interact, the team structure and rules and responsibilities. These are key areas that if you focus on from the design and the deployment area, you ensure that you will definitely get the most out of NSX. And from a mindset perspective, one of the things we talk about is to make sure we try and drive the change in terms of the way work is actually implemented. Usually, there are current mindset based on the way architecture is done these days and the way operations that is pretty much still fixed on the physical world. And the mindset is sort of fixed on certain things that it's always been done this way. But what we try to do, working with customers, is try and them to understand that we need to change that mindset, target a different way of looking at it. And we need to move away from that inward-looking silo expertise to domain experts with shared perspectives, because that's the way innovation takes place. I mean, you get the value of bringing people together. That's new values created at that point. You have the ability to interact and empower teams, and they make decisions that allows the actual delivery of what the organization expects from a networking perspective. Culture is also very, very important. Usually, when the mindset changes, the culture follows, because you have people who think alike and people who change has more or less they've used the change in their mindset to change the way work is done. And we have collaboration that is easier once you move into this new way of doing things. And we're no longer going into that physical world of being silo specific, being very good at just one thing of what we do. We now see the value in linking particular functions and values from the different silos. And as we saw earlier, one of the things NSX brings, it needs expertise from the compute world, from the virtualization, from the networking and from security. Once brought together and understand what's required, they can focus on developing a customer experience that particularly delivers a value that is definitely will drive what's needed by IT. The rapid feedback based on the platform and software allows you to sort of learn what's going on much faster, but you need people who need to take advantage of what's available, and hence using that allows you to move forward much easier. One of the points usually raised when we talk about team structure, it's not necessarily having building a new team. It could be a target team. It could be temporary or permanent. It could be a virtual team or physical. It's the points of having people with a shared perspective, collective interest, identified and managed or brought together. So it's not definitely you need to sort of form a new team with a new manager and all that, but it's just bringing people together who understand exactly what's required. And again, it could be roles in terms of it's not a head count. You just need to identify people who would play a particular part in delivering the expertise that's required by NSX because of the fast feedback nature and their ability to collaborate much easier. You need people with the right roles that would form part of his team, and sitting together, they would be able to deliver the most from NSX. And our customers have worked with, and I continue to work and help them to identify what these skills are from bringing this team together. So it's quite important that we don't think this necessarily as disrupting your entire organization and building new sort of a new hierarchy within your IT. It's just a case of identifying a core group of people who are required to deliver the most from the platform itself. And usually, I mean, I've sort of put this together. There are usually two main types of structures we see based on, I think 90% of the customers I've worked with sort of stick to one of these two. I mean, it's not necessarily what you would have to do, but I've just sort of, from the customers I've worked with, sort of brought these two common structures together. One, obviously, is the fully siloed, where you have all the silos, the compute, the storage, and network, and security exists. And what we say is sort of you sort of pick agents or pick from each of them and then form this virtual cross-functional team that allows you to deliver the value. So this new team have a shared perspective, have a common goal in terms of goal management, and they understand the strategy, the why, and they use their particular skills, obviously acquiring new ones, but they bring the knowledge they have already into this new cross-functional team. So their incentive is pretty much aligned to what every member is able to contribute to the team. And the idea is, at the end of that, that helps you to achieve the outcome you want. Now, this is one of the silos, this is one of the options we use. The other option, which is quite common also, is the existence of, there is a team. There's probably a virtual team or a cloud team that exists already, which usually maybe it's a compute and storage. So what we say is just add network and security into it. This also allows you to achieve the same outcome in terms of bringing a team together. So it's quite important to understand the key here is bringing and building this cross-functional team that allows you to create this single goal, shared perspective that allows you to get the most from the software itself. And quite important as you move and build this cross-functional team is to ensure you have roles and responsibilities more or less defined, because it's all well and good to just say you're all working together. It's part of understanding what each person brings into the team, and that allows you to build a proper what we consider a RESTful model, where we work with customers, and this is something you can do on your own as you sort of implement NSX. Just look at the particular function that the product sort of the platform delivers, see who's skilled at delivering it across this cross-functional team. And this is across the build, plan, run, and build a racy chat, and that allows you to more or less find the key responsibility and accountability and all the good stuff RESTful model does. This is pretty much still tied to the outcome that's required. So you have this platform that allows collaboration from a cross-functional team with a good RESTful model is what you should be aiming at. And ideally, as you move forward with the platform from a team perspective, it's something you would achieve when done carefully. So just a quick wrap up on the people. I mean, we say start with a small cross-functional team, and that's quite important. You select the right people, create the shared goals, and usually when you build and they start to deliver, I mean, we want to communicate that wins across the organization. The most important part here, as I said earlier, is definitely you need to build the right team. You need to get the right people in with the right particular attitude and the particular incentive, which is shared across the whole team to deliver on what's expected by the organization. So let's then move on to processes. I mean, if we consider the fact that we had seen earlier on that process is something that it definitely will be affected as you move into this new platform. I mean, I work with organizations, and pretty much its organization is just as effective as its processes. The better the processes are, the more fine-tuned the organization can be, and obviously you want your processes to be streamlined, and this is something NSX can provide for you. But in order to get the most from it, you need to make sure you are designing and improving your processes. So we talk about, first of all, the opportunity for you to revisit some of your existing processes. And what we say, or what I talk and work with customers on, it's not just operational procedures. While it's great, you can automate a whole bunch of stuff, but it could lead to a lot of inward silo optimization. We want to look at higher end processes too, and we'll look at some of the ones that you should be tackling, because we know NSX gives you, with automation, allows you to revisit how you do some of these things. And the processes that are fine-tuned and streamlined, if you more or less deliver them in a redesigned form, not designed to just, what you don't want to do is more or less look at your existing process and just shoehorn NSX in it. So you don't want to force NSX to the way you do things. You need to understand the value of NSX from a function perspective and redesign some of your existing processes so that it takes advantages of the automation and templates and the policies that are available. And it's quite important that you sort of measure before you change. See how your processes are now. And then as you change things, sort of revisit, because what you want to do is show to the business that the value of NSX within what we do is definitely helping us deliver better. As I said earlier, we spoke about automation, and it's quite important because it's one of the key values you get through NSX. Automation allows you now to more or less have this shared perspective. You have a single platform that allows you to configure, automate, and communicate across the domains of expertise. And what we talk about here is that as you redesign your processes, you got to link it to the operational goal of the IT and your organization. You need to understand that we are looking at automation to reduce fragmented workflows and a fragmented perspective, because you have this platform now that allows you to share knowledge across domains between the networking, the security firewall, and the computing storage. And this is the value NSX brings in. So as you look at existing processes, you need to identify the key strengths of functions that are now available in NSX and how that would change how you do things. One of the greatest opportunities you have for performance improvement for any processes is it's usually, and it comes from the functional interface where processes sort of move from one domain to another domain. It's sort of where you change the button. But when you look at it from SDDC and NSX perspective, because we have a tightly integrated team, you have a more streamlined and easier to manage process where the integration makes it very, very easy if designed properly to deliver that. We talk about capability and operational framework. I mean, from a networking perspective, there are certain processes that are key to any sort of network service you deliver. And from our end, we've sort of developed a framework which requires you to look at some capabilities which are driven by some processes. Fulfillment is one of them, obviously. You need to, however you're doing it now, you need to revisit how you actually implement your fulfillment, your service fulfillment when people ask for a network service. I mean, there are different aspects of it. There are, even if you are sort of outsourced parts of your networking and NSX is still in your organization, there are certain things you need to ensure that you've got covered. So from our end, from our framework, there are certain things that we call out that you need to make sure how you do it now is revisited as you take in NSX. This includes service provisioning, how even a request comes in for a new network to be implemented. That also needs to be revisited because these are all the things that you need to look Hello, sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Hello. Sorry about that. I think we lost sound for a while there. Apologize for that. Okay. Okay. Just continuing where we were left out from the moving into automation, we're talking about how NSX can help with automation to eliminate wait time and pretty much what should be part of what should be looked at or what should be what you should target as part of their deployment. Another aspect we're looking at as part of the fulfillment and what needs to change from a process perspective is how you implement change management. And one of the areas that is quite common specifically is firewall changes. And if you look at the way you traditionally change firewall, where you go through your normal process, it's quite for good reason why the control has been put in place. And where you go to your current steps, which are defined as your existing change control. We're saying that because you're moving to NSX, the focus should be on the right amount of control for each change and having the right tools to support it correctly. And if you look and investigate into that deeper, you would find the need to change how some of your existing change process happens, because NSX being software-based, policy, microsegmentation, you have fewer changes to the physical network, but how you actually implement the firewall changes based on the tagging and the deployment and the policies and the policy groups changes how that actually works. So part of what we talk about from an operational perspective is to investigate functionality from the process and then approach existing change management process and see how that needs to be adapted or needs to be revisited, and allows you to then move and do this in a much easier, much faster version, and allows you to get the value you want from the product itself. And what we need to remember again is that because we're running a blended cross-functional team, any fallout in any change is passed to a single team rather than a usual, finger pointing. So a lot of the changes that are software defined, that are driven based on the fact that it's policy, it's been tested, and it's been controlled based on the policy, needs you to change the way you approach how that's done. One of the other areas you need to also focus on is how you do assurance. And again, this is one of the key functionalities from a network service perspective. We look at fulfillment, we look at assurance here, where we look at how you do intelligent operations, as we call it, how you look at availability and performance. You need to have processes defined that changes and use more intelligent tools. How you do your monitoring, you need to make sure you look at how your processes currently in place are adapted specifically for NSX, because it wouldn't fit in the old FCAPS model of doing things. You need to make sure you have new processes around service level operating, service level management, how you do your monitoring, how you do availability and performance. These are aspects of what you need to revisit as part of your adopting NSX. You need to look at these processes and revise them specifically for NSX. Another aspect you need to look at also from a process perspective is capacity management, especially we're talking about here the edge gateway, the edge VM, which pretty much provides the uplinks to the outside world. We need to look at capacity across, link saturation. These are things you need to do from a management perspective, the processes you have in place, how you do capacity planning, utilization. You need to have well-defined processes for this. If existing processes exist, you need to look at how you're going to revisit those, because going through that process allows you to understand exactly what's required to make sure you get the best out of the product itself. And just to sort of the point made earlier, we've sort of developed a framework, and a lot of the stuff we just see now fall into capabilities that have been listed here. And these are the areas in the blue, what we've developed from VMware for NSX that allows you to more or less ensure you have the right processes in place, or the ones on the left which might exist already, which you need to adapt such that it fits into getting the most from NSX. As I said earlier, you are looking at defining an operating framework. And being a framework, obviously, you need to start picking the ones that are quite important to you at first. I mean, you don't need to implement all right away. But the key is in order to get the most out of NSX, you need to make sure you at least cover as much as you want, depending on your particular use case, your why, your strategy. You need to make sure you cover the processes. You need to have the descriptions, your workflows, runbooks, RACI charts for areas that are defined here. Because in doing that, you ensure you cover all that's required in order to make sure NSX fits into your organization and delivers the value it needs. And that's quite important. And finally, we just look at the tools. I mean, what tools do you need? And it's quite important to understand how NSX pretty much can be exposed. I mean, it's all about having the right tools to help manage the platform itself, which is NSX. And we look at it pretty much from two perspectives. There's a sort of a cloud management bit where you have the ability for the networking domain within NSX to create these templates and then attach it to self-service. In this case, it could be VRA that allows you to create a self-service network that can be provisioned as part of an end-to-end service from a VM. Or you could have tools that are used by the administrators that allow you to effectively manage the underlying platform itself. So from a tooling perspective, you need to understand that we, NSX itself, exposing the RESTful APIs allows you to develop tooling. I mean, you could use the GUI, but the scaling is the issue. Once you get better and you want to improve how you do things much faster, you need to look at tools that can allow you to create the functions that are pretty much driven from GUI. But once you move into a much easier and a much better operations, you then need to look at tools either from command line or API that's developed into programming languages. And here are some of the programming language, some of the tools that are available. I mean, we have the Power NSX, VRO. I mean, a lot of the Power NSX, the Python, the PyNSXV, a lot of what you would have the administrators use, and they're quite good. And I would encourage you to have a look. VRO too. The Ansibles, the Golans, and the Perl, they have API libraries that you can sort of move into creating a one-off infrastructure. But when you're now dealing with the day-to-day operations, the Power NSX is quite good, and it's something, and obviously the VRO also, which is sort of embedded as part of VRA, can be used because it also comes with some extensible functions that goes beyond what you get from the API. So from a tooling perspective, that's also quite important to understand that apart from the GUI, in order to scale and operate much faster and get better value, you need to investigate some of these tools that are available. to you. And of course, we have lots of partner in the ecosystem, a lot of old tools, depending on your specific mode of operation. There are all sorts of other tools out there that can augment and complement what you're doing. And because of the functionalities that's available from NSX, the CLI, the RESTful API, and all the SNMP and the other native networking protocols, it's possible to drive value and get more out of it. I mean, from VMware, we call our operation intelligent operations using VRNI, network insights, and the login side. And it's just that for network insight, it's quite important because we're talking about, if we look at a network, the new team, if we consider like a new hyper-converged team, what we also want to do is ensure the information we pull out from this platform is context aware, and that's what the network insight does very well. So you have a networking person that can use a tool, a compute person that can use a tool, and the information is brought out in the right context that allows you, this new hyper-converged team, to work easier. I mean, all the functionalities that are available could be, you could write your own tool that pulls out NetFlow or IPFix or any other metric, but you need something that gives it context such that the information is shared. So as you develop tools, make sure you don't do them in isolation. If you're going down the writing your own model, do it in such a way that information can be shared with the other team members, and that allows you to get the most out of the particular tooling you've developed. Just putting it all together, we've looked at the people aspect, we've looked at process, and we looked at technology. And it's all quite important because we know the best way to get yourself going is pretty much starts with a self-sufficient team, right? And then you sort of find your strategy or use case, build that up, find a good process to sort of get your teeth sunk into, and plan it such that you can gradually bring in more services. And as you succeed in this, it gives you the confidence to move further into the NSX and proving the value to the organization. And finally, it's just a case of it's not a single event. Going through this NSX journey, it's a bit of a process. You need to necessarily pick and move and gain the value as you go along. You'll get better at it. It's a case of the process of actually getting the value allows you to get a better insight into your organization. And then hopefully by doing that, you get to an end state where you have a cross-blended team where the processes are agile and standardized and using the right tools to develop and then provide the outcome that's required from NSX. And thank you very much for that. I do apologize for the drop in sound. There's a connection issue that occurred earlier. Thank you all.